Good evening, and welcome to day 4 of our celebration of Laudato Si week and the month of Mary. This evening, let us continue to pray and reflect together as we honour the Blessed Virgin Mary and care for our beautiful planet. Today, we will hear Hopkins' poem Inversnaid. In 1881, Hopkins became an assistant priest at a Jesuit church in Glasgow, Scotland. While there, he toured the Scottish Highlands and spent some time in the little village of Inversnaid, on the shores of Loch Lomond. That village, in turn, is close to some streams that race down over rocks to the lake. Hopkins always loved to hear how people speak, their dialects, their accents, the music in their voices, and that love shows up in this poem. See if when you hear it read aloud, you can hear a Scottish burr in the R sounds of the poem. It offers many such sounds. The poet describes a particular burn, which is Scottish dialect for brook or stream, in great detail. He then ends with an environmental plea that still resonates with us today. The poem is full of wonder at the wildness, the sheer beauty and peace of the scene, and his ringing concern that natural beauty should be properly valued and cared for and protected for the future. The poem begins by giving the reader a few initial details about the mountain stream, the Burn, to give it its Scottish name. The Burn flows powerfully and is of a dark colour. There is a great deal of foam on the surface that's a light tan shade. The next sections speak about the surrounding hillsides and how they cast shadows and contain varieties of plant life. Inversnaid concludes with the speaker asking what life would be like without wild places, such as that which he has just been describing. The wildness and wet should be left alone. It should exist without tampering. Hopkins wants the white weeds and wilderness to live on. Enjoy the poem.
This darksome burn, horseback brown, his row-rock high road roaring down, in coupand and comb the fleece of his foam floats and lows to a lake falls home. A wind-puffed bonnet of fawn froth turns and twindles over the broth of a pool so pitch-black fell frowning. It rounds and rounds, despair to drown. Decked with dew, dappled with dew, the grinds of the braes that the brook treads through, wily heathbacks, flitches of fern, and the beat bonny ash that sits o'er the burn. What would the world be once bereft of wet and of wildness? Let them be left, oh, let them be left, wilderness and wet. Long live the wheats and the wilderness yet.
Gerard Manley Hopkins shows his loving concern for the natural world in many of his poems. With his poet's eye, he looks upon created things with a contemplative gaze and sees the radiance of God shining in them. He agonizes when, often unthinkingly, the countryside is destroyed or defaced by human activity. For Hopkins, if we could allow ourselves to become more aware of the essential and profound harmony between God and everything that exists, then humanity would flourish in our evolving universe, and we would learn how to live in blessed solidarity with the whole of creation. Hopkins is a passionate advocate of care for creation. What would the world be once bereft of wet and of wildness? Let them be left, oh, let them be left wildness and wet. Long live the weeds and the wilderness yet. Pope Francis emphasizes in Laudato Si that as Jesus made his way throughout the land, he often stopped to contemplate the beauty sown by his Father and invited his disciples to perceive a divine message in things. Let us now watch a clip from the film Global Healing, which focuses on the gaze of Jesus.
I'm Carmody Gray, and I'm a theologian at the University of Durham. I'm really driven by that passion to connect our Christian faith with the earth. I really inherited that deep love of creation from my grandfather. My granddad was the other vet in a famous book and TV show and film in the 1970s and 80s that was called All Creatures Great and Small. It was set here and filmed here in Thirsk in North Yorkshire, where they now film the popular Yorkshire Vet programme. It's just so fantastic and really moving for me to actually be back here and feel the presence of him and the life that he lived, which has been such an inspiration for me all my life. Working with animals was the great passion, the great joy of my granddad's whole life. He was a Catholic, and I think this deep love and respect for nature really flowed from the heart of his Catholic faith, from an appreciation that this world is not just nature, but creation. What Pope Francis is saying in Laudato Si is not new. People have been living this and witnessing to this love of creation and this respect for creation for millennia. My grandfather was simply one of the many over the centuries who have showed that with his real life, the joy of living close to creation, the joy of living close to nature. For me, one of the most beautiful parts of Laudato Si is the section entitled The Gaze of Jesus. And he mentions Jesus' encounters with the plants and animals of nature as this celebration of their existence. Jesus speaks about the supreme beauty of a common flower by the roadside and invites his disciples to really let that touch them. And this is what perhaps the most fundamental thing in Laudato Si is, to let ourselves be touched by the world's beauty, by its grandeur, and let that do the work in us. And this is the way Pope Francis wants us to change. Not firstly a technical change or a practical change, it's firstly a spiritual change in the way we actually look at the world. And this is such a beautiful and liberating thing. It's not a to-do list that he gives us. It's a change of heart. In the very deepest sense, it's a conversion. The Greek for conversion is metanoia, which means to have a new mind. He wants us to have a new mind in the way that we think about the world and to take that mind from Jesus. Growing in the gaze of Jesus requires two things. It requires looking more steadily at Jesus and looking more steadily at creation. Both of these are difficult spiritual disciplines. They require us to resist the urge to just keep rushing and keep doing and keep problem solving and actually commit to slowing down, commit to listening. How many times have we just knelt down and just touched the earth and really felt that sense that this is the source of our life? It reminds me of Wordsworth saying that even the tiniest flower could move him to tears. And I feel Jesus was that sort of person. Jesus was moved to tears by the simplest, tiniest creatures. And this is really the ecological spirituality that Pope Francis wants us to have, to really be moved in that deep way by the reality of each tiny creature. Allow ourselves to be spoken to, shall we say, to be evangelized by the life even of a wildflower. My granddad had such a deep, contagious love of nature, and he took such delight in his animals and in any animals. I remember one day in the pigeon loft stretching out a pigeon's wing before me and saying, have you ever seen anything more remarkable than the wing of a bird? It's beautifully aligned, perfectly designed feathers that mysteriously carry this bird through the air. I mean, it's just a wonder, and I remember being utterly overwhelmed by that wonder. Jesus' tenderness towards the natural world comes across so powerfully in the Gospels. On every page he uses examples from nature to teach the gospel. He thought that nature was a kind of repository of spiritual truth. He would speak about the habits of birds, the habits of foxes, the growing of seeds, the nurturing of plants, the sun shining, the rain falling. He was soaked in nature. And he saw nature through the eyes of his Father, eyes of love. So this is Silver, and Silver is a absolutely magnificent, radiant creature of God, aren't you, Silver? Look at you. Look at those eyes. Look at that life in there. And it's God's glory coming out of these complex, miraculous, wonderful creatures. So many people love to watch David Attenborough and love to watch nature programs, and I think often what they really love, particularly about David Attenborough's nature programs, is actually not just the creature, but to witness his delight in the creature. Stunning, aren't you stunning? God's creatures are epiphanies of God's love and God's glory, and that encounter is so life-giving for us if we can just stop and take that time and make that space to really see them and allow them to speak to us and allow us to create the space to recognise that God is loving and caring for this creature. It's a possibility that's constantly open to us, and yet we miss it all the time. And when we're confronted with a creature so beautiful and extraordinary and unique as this owl, it's much easier to remember. It's much easier to remember the value of that encounter and to be touched by it and moved by it. The keynote of Christian faith, its most enduring and characteristic trademark, is God's endless love for what God has made, and that God goes to any lengths to bring what he has made back to him. That's what Jesus is all about. Pope Francis says that the risen Christ embraces and penetrates every particle of the cosmos. Most of us think that you've got to pray in church. Church is the place for praying. Jesus wasn't like that. Jesus prayed in the temple and he prayed out of the temple. He went up the mountain to pray as well as praying in the company of others. We can imitate him. We can pray in church, but we can and must pray with God in nature. Seek God in nature. Listen to God in nature. We really can do that anywhere. This isn't just about fleeing away to pristine wildernesses. I actually live in an extremely urban area. I have no garden. It's a really sort of indoor space, and my life is a really indoor life. That doesn't stop me from making it a total priority to go and seek out those tiny bits of nature that I do have access to, even if it's as tiny as just the plants in my house, or a window box, or the grass on the verge. We really need to get this woven into our daily life. Think for ourselves, how can I actually, even just a tiny bit, increase my consciousness and awareness of nature day by day, just stopping to listen to the birds. We can almost always hear birds at some point on our walk to work or just at the end of the day when the traffic has gone quiet. We can always see some plants. There are plants everywhere, we just don't notice them. One of the things I love most about Laudato Si is the title. It would be so easy for Pope Francis to have chosen a finger-wagging title. But the title means praise. The final and definitive note of his teaching is joy. Creation is something that we should celebrate. It's something that should fill us with awe and thanksgiving and wonder and praise. When Jesus saw nature, he saw it with that sense of wonder in the Father's love. When he speaks about the natural world, he speaks about it as somebody who sees it as a gift to be received with celebration. If we spend more time looking at Jesus, we can learn to see the world as he does, with that love, with that sense of wonder.
When inviting us to celebrate Laudato Si week, Pope Francis asked, "What kind of world do we want to leave to those who will come after us, to children who are growing up?" Let us now watch a cathode presentation on Laudato Si for children.
Pope Francis has written a letter addressed to every person on this planet, asking us all to protect the earth, our common home. In the letter, he says, "The earth is God's gift to us. It is full of beauty and wonder. And it belongs to everyone. But what we see today is that our common home has never been so hurt and mistreated. We have developed at a greater speed than we could have ever imagined, and have treated the earth like it has an unlimited supply of resources. We have taken more than our fair share from most people on the planet, as well as future generations. We have cut down the earth's natural forests, polluted the earth's waters, its land and its air. The earth, our home, is beginning to look more and more like an immense pile of filth. We are using more and more polluting fossil fuels, which is contributing to climate change. Climate change is one of the biggest challenges we face today. Climate change affects us all, but it's the poorest communities who suffer the most. And despite these problems, we are not slowing down on how much we buy and throw away, leaving a trail of waste and destruction. We cannot continue like this. We can change, and we can make a new start. The whole human family needs to work together to care for our planet Earth, so that we can sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. So let's put love for the world and love for our neighbours into action by living together in harmony and caring for nature. Can you take simple, everyday eco-actions to care for the Earth? Like turning off lights, reducing water waste, and recycling? And can you live more simply, reducing the amount of things we buy and throw away, so that we don't take more than our fair share? The world can't wait, so let's make that start today. Play your part to protect our common home. Laudato Si, a letter from Pope Francis on care for our common home.
Today, we would like to focus on children, and so we are delighted to welcome Eileen Dack, who has been a parishioner of St Anselm's from her childhood years, who attended St Anselm's Primary School as a child, as did her own children, and who now teaches in St Anselm's.
So, good afternoon and welcome everybody. This afternoon, I would like to welcome Mrs. Eileen Dack from St Anselm's Catholic Primary School. Eileen, you're very welcome.
Thank you,
and thank you for joining us in this time of lockdown for the school. Now, you've been associated with St Anselm's one way or another for quite a long time. So perhaps if I could invite you kindly to say a few words about yourself, a little of your story, and how long you've been associated with Southall and St Anselm's.
Well, I actually was born in Hammersmith, but I moved to Southall when I was 1, so I've been here over 50 years now. The parish has always been my parish all my life. I made my first Holy Communion, my confirmation in this parish. My family have been in this parish for a very long time. We've lived in the Southall area all our lives. And then obviously I got married, had 4 children. My children then went to St Anselm's Primary School. And then I became a teacher in St Anselm's Primary School, and I've been a teacher in Year 6 now since 2006. So from then I became a senior management leader, and now I'm acting deputy head.
Well, very welcome. So it's quite a long,
journey.
Rich experience.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's tremendous. Now, this week we've been talking in the parish about Laudato Si, and I know that in the school you've done a lot of work on Laudato Si. So perhaps if you would like to share with us your own personal thoughts on Laudato Si.
Well, the Laudato Si is, getting the children involved in a mission to be stewards and being disciples, and by using creative activities around the school to actually make them aware of God's creation. So we're not just looking at scripture readings, but we're actually getting the children to be proactive in looking after the environment. This year in particular, we took part in the Building Kingdom project, where all of the children were given a canvas bag where they had to create their own example of how we can look after the environment. All the families in the school actually took part in the project, and it was mainly around plastics, because at the time the children, through their creative curriculum, were thinking about the animals. How can we stop pollution? There was lots of information on the media, for instance, and the children wanted to make a difference. So we have used several projects in the school just to show the awareness, and the response from the families, from the children, was absolutely tremendous. And if anyone looks on the school website, they can actually see the photos and video that we've actually made. But the children are more aware. They don't, when they come to school, they use their bags. They put their PE kit in their bag or their homework in their bag. They don't use plastics or other materials. So it's bringing that awareness.
So these are the canvas bags that they what was the thinking behind that project?
I think initially it was to bring awareness and for the children to see that they could use other materials. Our next step, which we didn't actually manage to do, was we were going to get in contact with Tesco's CEO and have that CEO come into St Anselm so that he could be interviewed, and then maybe try to persuade him to actually purchase canvas bags for children in other schools, so that we were looking at ourselves as disciples or pioneers in starting the project off, so that it can be then continued to other schools in the deanery and wider.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. So the focus was on plastics and avoiding plastics.
Yeah, avoiding plastics.
And did the children do anything with the plastics that they found in the school?
Well, the children made, in early years in particular, they used the plastic to make constructions. They made Christmas decorations out of the plastics. The children switched from using a plastic bottle every day. They were bringing in their own water bottle, and they were more aware. So they were avoiding actually using the plastics, but when they actually designed some of their bags, they used the recycling materials to show that these were the types of materials that they shouldn't be using. But it was an eye-opener. It was very good.
How do you think the children themselves feel about all this?
I think through our creative curriculum, the children are learning different things, not about, it isn't just about creation, but about the wider world. Through ICT, they do a lot of research. Obviously, they listen to the news every single day, so they get to know what is happening to the sea life. And because they're more aware, they want to make the difference. So that's why they've personally taken, this opportunity not to purchase items with plastics and so forth.
Right, so they actually decide not to do that.
Not to use it, yeah.
And in what ways have they helped to improve the environment of the school, would you say?
Well, the children now are growing in early years, and in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, they have an opportunity to plant. So it isn't just flowers, it's vegetables. We have a planting area now for the children. So the children take that responsibility of watering the plants, planting the seeds, which is in the classroom and outside. So it's more exploring and taking that opportunity further.
Mm-hmm. Now, I seem to remember just that once or twice, one or two children have done some really pretty outstanding work in this area, haven't they?
Yeah.
And I think one or two of them may have won little awards for their work.
Yeah, they have. I mean, the children have had opportunities to make media productions, and they have had a lot of, they've done a lot of leaflet work and posters and creative writing, which they have won awards for.
See, one of the, we've been looking at different poems this week.
Yeah.
One of the poems that we were looking at was a poem by Gerard Manley Hopkins called Binsey Poplars. Mm-hmm. And it was about the destruction of trees.
Yeah.
Now, what do the children think about the destruction of trees?
Well, the children and the parents were actually very dismayed at the fact that a couple of years ago in the Manor Gardens, for instance, that the trees were actually being cut down for the additional building that went onto the Manor Gardens.
How old were these trees?
Well, these trees actually weren't very old. They were only about 200 years. The ones that they had actually chopped... No, it isn't, because the ones that they chopped down were the younger ones. The older ones, they left. And so they, because at the time, the council wanted the building in a certain area, those trees, unfortunately...
So, it was a prized collection of trees.
Yeah, it was. They were beautiful trees.
Yes.
Yeah. And, but there again, in our playground at the moment, we've got beautiful trees.
Yes.
So, it was a shame that they were cut down needlessly, but the children did write persuasive letters to the council. The parents helped with a petition. And we did get some support through Mr. Sharma as well, but there was only so much that we could do for someone to actually listen to us. But the children were very passionate about the trees.
Mm-hmm. So, and they are very concerned about their future.
Yes, they are.
The future of their world.
Yes, they are.
And how do they communicate that to their parents, would you say?
I think, what the children are actually learning in school every day, they take home to their parents. In the creativity, it's not just in their writing, but the actual things that they make in construction. They'll, through recycling materials, they are able to take home to their parents, and they talk to their parents, most importantly, about what they're doing in school and how we can change the world. Yes. So the parents are actually very much proactive as well.
Yes. And, we use this expression, eco-friendly, and we talk about eco-friendly communities. You have lived in the parish, as you say, for a number of years. And how would you say that St. Anselm's might become a more eco-friendly parish?
I think what it is that we need to be more aware of what is happening in our community and how we actually recycle, and making sure that every week we do, put out for the recyclers paper, plastic, glass, and even food waste. I myself at home, we don't use a dustbin bag every single week. We recycle everything in our house, and I think if we could get that message across. And then what will actually happen is that we'll have a cleaner environment and a better earth.
I mean, we have a lot of, parties and so on. People use a lot of plastic stuff at these.
Yeah.
What would you say they should be doing?
Well, they should be using plastic beakers. I mean, something that you can actually reuse.
Something you can reuse.
Something that you can actually reuse. I mean, you don't have to have paper plates. You can use a plate, and you can use a cup. You don't have to, it isn't just about that convenience of let's get the paper plates and the bunting and what have you and put it away. You could recycle those types of materials.
Yes. Anyway, well, Eileen, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Father.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Let us end with a hymn to Our Lady.